The war was over. Troy had fallen. The men who had defended the city lay dead in the streets. But for the women still hiding behind those burning walls, the nightmare had only just begun. Mothers clutched their children. Young girls prayed someone would save them. But no one came. By sunrise, their world would never exist again. This is the tragic story of the women of Troy, the forgotten victims of one of history's most famous wars. But this nightmare didn't begin the night Troy burned. It began 10 years earlier, when a single decision sealed the city's fate forever. It all started with a Trojan prince. Paris, according to ancient Greek tradition, Paris fell in love with Helen, the wife of the Spartan king Menelaus. When Paris brought Helen to Troy, the Greeks called it an unforgivable insult. Kings from across Greece united under one promise: bring Helen back or destroy Troy forever. Thousands of ships crossed the Aegean Sea. Thousands of soldiers landed outside Troy's mighty walls. No one imagined the war would last 10 long years. At first, the Trojans believed their massive walls would never fall. And for years, they were right. The Greeks attacked again and again, but Troy refused to surrender. It seemed impossible to conquer. But while the soldiers fought outside the walls, destiny was quietly preparing a far darker ending inside them. After 10 exhausting years, the Greek army appeared to do the impossible. They left. The beaches that had echoed with war for a decade fell silent. Their ships disappeared beyond the horizon. Outside the gates of Troy, only one thing remained: a giant wooden horse. The Trojans couldn't believe it. Had they finally won? Cheers filled the streets. People embraced one another. Children laughed for the first time in years. For the women of Troy, it felt like the nightmare was finally over. But not everyone celebrated. One man stepped forward, a Trojan priest named Laocoön. He looked at the wooden horse, then warned his people with words history would never forget. Beware of Greeks bearing gifts. He begged them, don't bring it inside the city. According to ancient tradition, moments later, 2 enormous sea serpents emerged from the sea and killed Laocoön and his sons. To many Trojans, it looked like a sign from the gods. His warning was ignored. The giant horse was pulled through Troy's gates. The city erupted in celebration. Music echoed through the streets. Wine flowed freely. After 10 years of fear, the people finally believed the war was over. But hidden deep inside the wooden horse, Greek warriors waited in absolute silence. Among them, Odysseus, the mastermind behind the plan. They listened as the celebration continued outside. They waited for darkness. Then, when every street had grown quiet, when the fires burned low, when the exhausted city finally fell asleep, the horse slowly opened. Greek soldiers climbed down into the darkness. Without making a sound, they crossed the sleeping city, reached the massive gates, and opened them from the inside. At that very moment, the Greek fleet, which had only been hiding behind a nearby island, returned under the cover of night. Thousands of soldiers rushed through the open gates. Within minutes, Troy's final night had begun. The streets that had echoed with celebration now echoed with screams. Buildings caught fire. Warriors fought desperately. Families ran through smoke-filled streets searching for one another. King Priam, the old ruler who had watched the war consume his kingdom, was killed. The palace fell. The mighty city that had survived 10 years of siege collapsed in a single night. But for the women who survived, the fall of Troy was not the end of their suffering. According to the ancient Greek tradition preserved in works such as the Trojan Women and other classical sources, Many surviving women faced captivity and enslavement after the city's defeat. Queens became captives. Princesses lost their homes. Mothers were separated from loved ones. Everything they had known vanished before sunrise. And among those survivors, 3 women would become symbols of Troy's greatest tragedy: Hecuba, Andromache, and Cassandra. Their stories were even more heartbreaking than the fall of the city itself. The sun finally rose, but it no longer shone over the proud city of Troy. The streets were covered in ashes. The palace had fallen. The great walls that had protected generations had failed in a single night. For the surviving women, there was no victory, only silence, only grief, only uncertainty. One by one, they were gathered together, not as queens, not as wives, not as daughters of Troy, but as captives. Among them stood Queen Hecuba. Just hours earlier, she had been the queen of one of the richest kingdoms in the ancient world. Now, she had lost her husband, her sons, her home, and her kingdom. Everything she had built over a lifetime had disappeared before sunrise. Then there was Andromache, the wife of Troy's greatest warrior Hector. She had already watched her husband die during the war. Now, according to ancient Greek tradition, she faced the loss of her future as well. The family she dreamed of protecting was gone. The city she called home no longer existed. Nearby stood another woman, Cassandra, a princess who, according to Greek mythology, had warned that Troy was heading toward disaster. But no one believed her. Now, the destruction she had tried to prevent surrounded her. For these women, the war did not end when the city fell. It simply became a different kind of tragedy. The heroes would be remembered in songs. The kings would be remembered in history. But the women of Troy would carry the weight of that night for the rest of their lives. Ancient Greek writers return to their story again and again, not because Troy lost a war, but because they believed war leaves its deepest scars on those who never chose to fight. Thousands of years later, the ruins of Troy still stand. Visitors walk among broken stones, searching for the city that once challenged the greatest armies of its age. But behind every fallen wall lies another story. Not of kings, not of heroes, but of mothers, daughters, and families whose lives changed forever. The walls of Troy turned to dust, its kings disappeared, and its warriors became legends. But the greatest price of the war was paid by those who never chose to fight. Long after the swords fell silent, the grief of Troy's women lived on in poems, tragedies, and memories that survived for thousands of years. Empires rise, empires fall, but the suffering left behind by war can outlive every victory. And perhaps that is the real legacy of Troy.